Yeah. Hi, my name is Maggie Hooten, and I'm a triple minority. I'm half Mexican, I have ADHD, and I'm... lesbian, that. Also, I'm a woman. If I was a drink, it'd be called the politician's nightmare and taste like the bartender was having a midlife crisis. So when I signed up for this course to talk about struggles in my community, it was a bit of a struggle to pick a community and a struggle. I decided to find a topic that plagued all of my communities about equally, landing perfectly in the middle of the multiple Venn diagram. After hours scrolling the depths of Reddit, YouTube video essays, and reading articles with the worst web design I've ever seen, I finally found something I wanted to talk about. An issue that runs rampant in almost every minority community ever, not just the ones I belong to. They all have pick-me's. Okay, hear me out. So, what do I mean when I say pick-me? Well, the term originally started with pick-me girls, women who purposely try to separate themselves from and stand out amongst other women, rejecting traditionally feminine hobbies and behaviors, all for the sole purpose of attracting men, defining themselves as not like the other girls. While the term was coined relatively recently, as long as there's been community, there's been pick-me's, those who forcefully try to separate themselves from the whole, those who say, not I, and deprecate their own community in the process of making themselves special. But why, I hear you asking through the screen? Why, when that so obviously harms many people in multiple ways? For the same reason anyone does anything. Validation. Let's talk about Donald John Trump for a second. This is going to be one of those videos. Specifically, let's talk about the 2024 election. Voter polls show that 46% of Latinos in America voted Republican, 55% in Texas. What the guys? I just can't. Here's a list of all the specifically racist against Latinos things that Donald Trump has done that I could find. There's almost definitely more that has not been widely documented. A few highlights from that list include launching his 2016 campaign with a speech about how all or most Mexicans coming over the border are, and I quote, bringing illegal drugs, bringing crime, and are rapists, referring to El Salvador and Haiti as holes, calling white supremacists who were committing violent hate crimes against Latinos and racial minorities very passionate about making their country great again, putting mass deportations into place, specifically targeting Latino communities. Don't even get me started on they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats, or that DEI bull. It's all just a mess. Though he denies it, it's pretty easy to tell that Trump is racist. But despite that, almost half of Latinos in the US still voted for him in the 2024 election. Why? It's because he's racist. Well, it's a little more complicated than that. See, Trump is not the first person to say things like this about people like me. Far from it. But he is someone very much in the public eye, with a very large, let's call it passionate following, who has brought a lot of hate to Latinos and Latino immigrants. Over and over again, he has painted an over-exaggerated, unpleasant image of Latino illegal aliens as something dirty. People who don't deserve to be in this country. They're taking your jobs, they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cat. Needless to say, this has caused a lot of hate towards Latinos in the US, and this is where it gets a bit tricky to explain. Put extremely simply, people don't like being hated. But a little less simply, Latinos in the US have been hurt and degraded and beaten down for generations. And when you're told over and over again by a singular party that you're not good enough, that it's in your very nature to be bad, you either start to believe them or you become desperate to prove them wrong. But this isn't a story of how Latinos as one held hands and stood up to proclaim that brown is beautiful. No, this is more of a run to whiteness. An attempt not to rise up against your oppressors, but to become one of them, because you're just so sick of living on the bottom. But there's another reason too, and this harkens back to that over-exaggerated image earlier, because that picture has been blown so out of proportion and so harkened singularly on traits that are bad, that any Latino that's not that, which is the vast majority, can point at it and say, not I, and run in the opposite direction to whiteness. It's almost like Stockholm Syndrome. People have become so convinced that they will be normal and accepted if they act like and love the people that hurt them constantly. If your name was Maria, you start going by Mary. You stop speaking Spanish in public and try to hide your accent. You start putting down immigrants for doing the same thing your family might have done. And in doing so, you reinforce the idea that those things are bad. And most importantly, you vote the way they tell you to vote, even if it goes against your own interests. On that last note, let's talk about conservative queers. Y'all ready to see a whole lot of internalized homophobia? Queerness has had a bit of a rocky history in the US. In fact, gay marriage only recently celebrated its 10-year legal anniversary. Homophobia has run rampant for decades and still does today. There is quite a bit of biphobia and transphobia in the LGBTQ community, which I just wanted to acknowledge before we dive deeper in. Not okay. But today I wanted to talk about something a little less specific. Not unlike our previous topic, in their hatred, bigots have painted an over-exaggerated picture of someone who is too gay. Flamboyant, androgynous, probably a furry with septum piercing, blue hair, and pronouns. Obviously, unacceptable. Many conservative queer people are white, cisgender men, to the surprise of no one, who, due to being these things, perceive themselves as being above the rest of the LGBTQ+ community, because they still benefit from conservative ideology in some way. While conservative queer people haven't had as big a political impact on the LGBTQ community as a whole, I have seen firsthand the damage their ideologies have done on an emotional level. The danger here lies within the phrase, I'm blank, but blank is pushing it. I'm gay, but neopronouns are pushing it. The idea of pushing it implies a line, my dude, and where do you draw that line? Where does the phrase, all identities are valid, stop? Not to mention, a lot of queer people want to be flamboyant or to loudly express their identity, or maybe to identify with something a little bit outside of the social norm. But because of the constant shame and pressure put on crossing that imaginary line from within their own community, they are pushed away from maybe ever finding themselves. This also hugely discourages young people who are probably exploring their identity for the first time ever from even approaching things like neopronouns or dressing flamboyantly. Even things like going to pride parades, which have historically been essential places for people of all ages to feel welcome in their community, are judged for having pride. I want to emphasize that it's not just queer people who outright identify as conservatives at fault here. Their ideologies spread beyond its walls. It's behind enemy lines. What I'm trying to say is that many liberal queer people are guilty of this too. I have witnessed this multiple times, but for this video, I interviewed a fellow queer friend of mine who wanted to remain anonymous, but told me about a time they were affected by this. In middle school, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to identify as. I told my friends at the time, who were all liberal and mostly queer, that I wanted to use they/star pronouns. They laughed in my face immediately and said they weren't going to do that. Then they started talking about how weird neopronouns were right in front of me. While I eventually figured out my gender identity was something else, my friend's reaction was hugely discouraging for me. It has taken me a while to feel comfortable sharing my identity with people again, and I really think it's indicative of a larger problem within the LGBTQ community. It feels weird changing places like this, but I feel like this is what you're supposed to do in a video essay, so I was going to have a whole third segment on ableism in the neurodivergent community, since that's also a pretty big problem, but it's fairly simple given everything we've already covered, so I'll give you the rundown. Neurodiversity is a spectrum that branches in many directions, one of those being low support needs and high support needs. People on the lower end of the spectrum who can hold full-time jobs, live on their own, largely keep their emotions in check, portray themselves as better than the ones who maybe can't do those things, might be nonverbal or need a caretaker or things like that. This is, again, due to years of oppression and shame from the neurotypicals, leading those who can act more normal or mask the stuff better to be ableist towards their peers or towards their own weird behaviors, such as stimming, which is amazing. By the way, more people into STEM, it's like the best thing ever. Moving on. Wrapping up this whole whatever this is, I just want to emphasize one thing. Pick-me's hurt themselves too, because they're not acting in their own self-interest. They're acting how they think their oppressors want them to act, actively hurting themselves in the process because they're still minorities. Voting against their own interests, suppressing who they are as a person, spreading harmful stereotypes about their own communities, and trying to make community with people who would throw them under the bus the moment the opportunity presented itself. Because no matter how hard you try, you will always be too gay, too brown, too weird. The face-eating leopards, the leopards everyone told you would eat your face, the ones with a sign around their necks saying, hey, I eat faces, will in fact eat your face if you get too close. Now, I'm not trying to garner sympathy for these people. They're well aware of the harm they cause, but I am trying to explain that no one benefits here. Except for the oppressors. They're doing great. We're attacking each other. We're doing their job for them. So how do we fix this? Besides ending bigotry, I guess. I really wish there was a simple answer to that question. I don't know, maybe we just need to stop putting everything in boxes all the time and just accept that most things are a spectrum. And if the way someone isn't directly hurting anyone else, then it's probably fine. And to stop being afraid to express yourself, because who really cares that you should care about? Yes, the conclusion to this video truly is just be yourself. Yeah. Or maybe it's something more like, the system we live in today is screwed beyond words, putting the worst people in the places they can do the most damage, silencing marginalized communities in favor of the norm, distracting us with infighting and policies no one actually believes in so the real damage can be done quietly, and the quicker we all realize this, the better off we'll all be. You know, or something like that.
Don't be racist. I am a building.